If you're plagued by bouts of depression and anxiety, that does destabilize your identity.
And deep and profound enough to get you through bad times, because there will be very bad times in your life.
When you're trying to lead people forward out of the darkness, let's say, out of anxiety and depression and despair and resentment and bitterness and anger and all of those things, catastrophic interactions with their family, is that you get them to stop avoiding confronting the terrible things that are in front of them, right? So basically what you do, instead of saying to them, you know, those terrible things that are happening, just ignore those and find some peace, right? Get your mind away from it. That isn't what you say. You say, turn around and look at them even more than you've been looking at them. It's very paradoxical advice, but of all the things that have been proven to aid people's recovery and movement towards mental health, that's like at the top of the list. Voluntary confrontation with what you are afraid of, or what you despise, even, for that matter.
One of the fundamental theses of 12 Rules for Life, and also of Maps of Meaning, is that because life is essentially tragic in its fundamental essence, you need a sustaining meaning that's deep and profound, and deep and profound enough to get you through bad times, because there will be very bad times in your life. There'll be death, and there'll be illness, and there'll be disappointment of all sorts. And there'll be just the standard difficulties of life in the world to contend with. And you really must have something that's profound and powerful to set up against that. And I think that your voluntary adoption of the struggle to improve being is the proper antidote to that.
If you're plagued by bouts of depression and anxiety, that does destabilize your identity. So it's almost by definition. But having said that, look, this is when habit and plan and strategy are so useful. So in the periods of depression that I've had, and some of them were long and certainly the most unpleasant experiences of my life, this is when you need a philosophy, let's say, that's allied with your vision and your strategy to sustain you. Because what would happen to me is that, you know, I have a vision, and I suppose the vision is of a world that's better, that's less likely to descend into ideological catastrophe, and where people are more responsible and more awake and more educated and healthier. All of that, a vision of a better world, you know, a world that's less hellish at least, but also a better world, and some sense of what role I might play in that. And so that's very motivating. Like, it's a profound goal to try to make things better. And you can do that locally. You can do that for yourself. You can do that for your family. You can do that for the broader community. And all of that's worth it, man. It's worth making some sacrifices for. It's worth suffering for to some degree. And then you decompose that into the day-to-day and week-to-week strategies and actions that you're undertaking, the plans and the activities that you're putting forward to make that dream a reality, to realize it. And then when the depression and anxiety come along, you think, part of it with depression, it's just bloody endurance. It's like you get up and you work through the next hour, you try to stay on track, you try to implement your strategic plans to the best of your ability, and you hope and you pray that you'll get through it. You know, you'll get through it, and that the darkness will recede, and you stay on track. You eat even though you're not hungry. You get up even though you want to stay in bed. You interact with people even though you'd rather be alone. And it's the benefit of disciplined habits can sustain you. It's like the boat you're rowing in through a terrible storm, leaks and all, and maybe you'll be overwhelmed, but you have the boat and you can row forward, and that's what you've got. And so endurance is a huge part of it. And then I would say with its anxiety, it's the same thing. It's like, or very much the same, as you're terrified and uncertain, but you move ahead to the best of your ability. And again, you operate at least to some degree on hope. And if you haven't got hope, then you've got blind, bloody endurance. And that's all motivated by some sense that you're working towards something that's worthwhile working toward. And that is, well, that's your own long-term well-being, to treat yourself properly. It's the stability and productivity and harmony and health of your family. That's a huge deal. And then it's whatever benefit you can be to the community. And if you have to limp along and drag yourself forward in order to maintain that pathway, then so be it. Because it's better than the alternative.
You make the world a much better place, much worse place if you don't take care of yourself. So you should bloody well take care of yourself, because, well, that's what the chapter's about. It's partly because you have something valuable to bring into the world. That's the thing about being an individual. It's the thing that Western civilization has always recognized, that as an individual, you have a light that you have to bring into the world. And that if you don't bring it into the world is a dimmer place. And that's a bad thing, because when the world is a dim place, it can get very, very, very dark. And so it's necessary, not just so that you feel better, not just so that you're a number one lobster, none of those things. You need to take care of yourself because you're in the best position to do that. And it's necessary for you to take care of yourself. Despite the fact that we're mortal and vulnerable and self-conscious and capable, not only capable of doing terrible things, but actually do them. Despite all that, you still have that responsibility. You need an ideal because you have nothing to aim at, but an ideal is a judge, and you always fall short of the ideal. So how the hell can you have the benefits of having an ideal without having the crushing blow that goes along with having the judge that always regards you as insufficient? So I was trying to work that out in the chapter, and this is something I've had to work out a lot as a clinical psychologist. It's like, well, let's say you need a goal, but we don't want to let your distance from the goal crush you. So you got to set up a goal, and then you got to break the goal down into parts so that you can move towards it and you have a fairly high likelihood of doing it. So that's a bit of practical, I wouldn't say advice, it's because it's better than advice. It's some practical knowledge about how to go about achieving an aim. Set a high aim, but differentiate it down so you know what the next step is, and then make the next step difficult enough so you have to push yourself past where you are, but also provide yourself with a reasonable probability of success. It's also what you do with children, right? You want to push them because they need to grow up and be more than they are, right? But you don't want to crush them with constant failure. So what you do is aim high and make the goal difficult but proximal.
And so Jung had an axiom that he derived from the alchemists, which was insterquilinus invenitur, which roughly meant that which you most need will be found where you least want to look. Which is,
fuck man.
Yeah. Well, that was also his explanation for why people weren't enlightened. Because you think, well, the California approach to enlightenment, to speak, kind of satirically, is follow your bliss. It's like, well, that's easy. If that was the case, everyone would be enlightened. But the Jungian approach is, no. You do what's meaningful and pay attention, follow the truth, and it will take you to the worst place you can imagine. And then maybe there's some chance for enlightenment.